Hi, this is CJ with Cycletron. I'm here with John Holloway of Holloway's Motorcycle Service here in Grandview, Missouri. He's kindly agreed to give us a background on what it's like to run your own independent motorcycle repair shop. So, John, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I got the name correct, didn't I?
You sure did.
Okay, good. No, I mean the cup of your service shop. So, I mean, I think this is great. You've done work on a couple of my bikes, this 2020 Roadster,
right? And
you know, the Harley shop. They were a little squeamish when I told them it was a repaired salvage. So,
right.
And then you worked on my '82 750 Virago. I was having trouble getting those carbs
vintage,
synced up. So, I just thought, you know, it'd be interesting to find out your background, how you got into this, how you see things headed in the future.
Yeah. So where do you want me to start? Just like how I started into this?
Yeah. Some of your background, how you got into this.
So I'm actually from Seattle, Washington, and I'm a military brat. So my dad retired. We ended up in Seattle, and I was kind of bumbling around. And then finally, about 23, 24, I had a person I was buying motorcycles from, and I needed a job, and he says, I'll train you and I'll teach you everything I know. And so I got into it. Literally did not know what I was doing. All I knew is how to ride it and how to ride bikes. And he taught me everything. And so I just got into it. About 3 years into it, I really loved it. And I found that there was some joy in taking something apart or having pieces come in and then putting it together like a puzzle and then giving it back and getting paid for it and seeing them being happy. So that's what drove me. That was the number one reason why I got in this field. And the other one was I was listening to a lot of women that were complaining about their being overcharged. And that really got under my skin because I thought, you know, of all the people, motorcycles tend to be male dominated, but there was a vast amount of women that wanted to ride, but they didn't trust mechanics. And I wanted to be one of those mechanics that they could trust. And those are my two big reasons why I got into it. So.
Yeah, that would be kind of discouraging for people thinking that they're getting taken advantage of.
Yes, very, very much so.
You know, another trend right now in general is that a lot of dealer service departments don't want to work on, quote, older bikes. And
yes.
That can range from something as only 10 years old, you know?
Yeah, or even newer. I've seen
really?
it. Yeah, I've seen it as much as 5 years. They come in here like, I won't work on it because it's 5 years old. And I've worked for dealerships, and I understand the politics. I understand the business plan. I understand why they do what they do. But what's sad is that these bikes are designed to last for years, as you know. They can last 20 years without a whole lot of problems. And shops like myself, it's a great industry only because there's only a few of us, and there's a lot of money that you can tap into, either helping folks, making money, teaching folks on their bikes. And so a lot of the folks, I think, that go to dealerships, they either sign up into a program where it's all paid for. You know, they pay, I don't know, between $1,000 and $3,000 to say for a package, and then they have all the maintenance done. But I think that a lot of that you can get a lot cheaper, done a lot cheaper. Yeah.
In terms of the prepaid service plans?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to drive at. Yeah, is that prepaid. Some of the prices I've heard are a little bit on the high side, in my opinion. They're banking that you're not going to come in to have tires done. They're banking that your battery's not going to go bad. They're banking that, you know, you're probably going to wreck that bike and you'll never fall through with the $3,000 you spent on that program. So that's just my opinion.
So I guess the population of motorcycles that you typically work on, can you describe what that is? Is it older metrics, or what brings people into you?
So when I first started, I was just doing this as a hobby. I thought, I'll just help a few people. I'm just going to be a tire shop, and that's what I thought, because there isn't really any motorcycle tire shop. That's it. And I know of a couple of companies that had done that, where that's all they did was tires, and they made a good amount of money. The problem was when I opened up the doors, then I started hearing the stories of, I was at the dealership, and you know, I need this and that. Okay, I'll fix it for you. And then they just started pouring in with these issues and these overpricing, in my opinion, from dealerships, or them not working on it. And that's what drove me to open it up to my crowd. I thought was going to be Harley, but it ended up being Harleys and lots of metrics, and then into scooters. So that's basically my bulk. I would say I do about 50-50 on metric and Harleys, and I do a smattering of scooters. Chinese
Yeah,
scooters.
I see what you have here. What year is this?
Now this was a 1965 Suzuki K15 80cc. They used to call it Hillbilly. That's actually one of 19 old bikes I used to have in Seattle, and that one was when I just didn't have the heart to sell it, so I kept it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I think last time it ran and I drove it was maybe 30 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a little tiddler run on an island, or they call it Vashon Island. So, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The tank's reminiscent of the old Hondas.
Yeah. Everybody's always attracted to that, and I've always thought that was a classic, nice design back in the day. Is that, and to go back to the thing you were just talking about, what was my traffic and my clientele? I would say I do a lot of vintage bikes, and that's where my history is. I started this in the mid '80s, and in the mid '80s, there were a lot of bikes still from the '60s and '70s are still running around, and a lot of us at our age, we're getting old, and most young folks nowadays don't even know how to work on a carburetor. So,
yeah, I don't want to, sound like I'm bashing anybody that comes out of this trade schools nowadays, but I think so much of it's computer driven.
Yes.
They're told to hook it up to the computer and wait for a code, and then order the part and replace the part.
Right.
And the mentality of trying to wrap your head around what's going on, try different things.
Yes.
That's not consistent with the business model as you mentioned.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's always been a little bit of a gripe of mine. Is when I worked for dealerships, I was a service manager, a tech, mechanic, service writer, you name it, done it all. And it is like that. You just plug it in, like, the coolant temperature sensor is bad. And I try to tell the young folks, even some girls that came through, that it's important to try and figure it out. I do lose money trying to solve issues in here because I don't have those computers. Mm-hmm. But I have a young gentleman named Noah that comes in here, and he's 19, and I've been teaching him the ropes. And I said, I don't want you just replacing parts. I want you to understand how things work. Mm-hmm. And that computer is being fed certain information that allows it to run the way it does. And the computer just plugs in and just goes straight to the source, which I understand they're trying to save money to get to the problem, but I don't think you're a good mechanic, in my opinion, is when you just look at it and go, well, just look at it, there's the part, replace it. I want them to figure it out. That's kind of my thing.
Well, what do you see with the trend with increasing electronics and computerization where, my son had an 821 Monster, and he had his service done by a local shop in Wichita, an independent shop, and they weren't able to reset the maintenance code because it's kind of proprietary to Ducati's computer.
Yes.
So is that becoming more of an issue for you?
Yes, it is. I've got a Ducati on display right there that I'm working on. A gentleman just bought it. It blew up like on a second ride. Just the parts alone were $2,500. The labor is probably going to be another $2,000. I mean, it's insane. But that's an exotic, what I call an exotic bike from Europe. And so there are going to be some issues such as electrical things where once I get this thing running, I'm going to have to start clearing codes. And sadly, I got to do what a lot of folks do. I do have to go online, go through forums, find someone who's got some idea of how to do some of this stuff. And I do have some friends that I can tap into that'll come down here and clear codes and help me out, which I really do believe in, that we all should be working together. I'm not going to work with you, I'm not going to work with you.
Is that an 821 there?
No, that is a Ducati 1100 Evo, is what they call it, like a 2000, I want to say 13 maybe?
Oh, okay.
Sad, sorry, I'm not.
Yeah, I was just curious. Kind of had the trellis frame, I thought it was some kind of monster.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous bike when it's all together. But yes, back to those electronic diagnostics and stuff, that's a really tough part of this industry. Is a lot of small shops, they either can't afford the equipment to do that. And if I could go ahead and afford equipment, it could be $1,000 to $3,000 to buy the computer, and I might get one of those every couple months. It's not going to pay it for itself. So we find other ways of trying to solve and fix that problem.
So there's a way.
There is a way. It's just a little bit slower. It's not quite cost effective because you're spending more time trying to diagnose and go through the old school way of finding things instead of just plugging it in. And that's where the dealers got you. It's all about getting in and getting out. And I understand it. They do make really good money doing that way. They cut it down, their labor time and troubleshooting a lot quicker.
So, for example, if somebody has this situation where they bought a used Ducati and the engine blows up, they could go to the dealer and pay a lot of money and have it done quickly.
Yes.
Or if they're if they have more time or more patient or more budget conscious, then they can come to you.
Right. Shops such as myself, yes. And there are out there. They're just kind of, they're not around every street corner. You just got to find them. And I always encourage people, you can come to me, you can go to another shop, bounce around a little bit until you feel comfortable with somebody. That's my idea is and my philosophy is making the customer feel good about leaving their bike here. And I never try to toot my horns. I'm the best, because I'm not the best. But I will give you an honest, straight answer on what you need and how to fix it, and give you direction too if I can't solve it. But I would say about 95% or more I could solve just about everything that comes through the shop.
I'd say with somebody like you, it's a commitment. You're willing to make a commitment to take a bike in, attempt to figure out what's wrong with it, and advise whether you can repair it or not.
Yes.
It's a process.
Right.
So that's saying a lot. I mean, that's still that's a great service.
Right.
I mean, there's people with older bikes, like I've got bikes that, like, whether it was repair salvage or the 82 Virago.
Yes.
Even in the winter, recently the dealer would take it in. Now he has nobody that works on car bikes.
Right.
So, and that's before I came to see you.
Yes.
So it's like, well, either I could buy a vacuum gauge and try
and figure it out yourself. Yeah.
Or,
that particular bike is a little bit difficult. That's an old school Viragos. There was 2 sync adjustments. There was one on a low idle and there was one on high idle. Most bikes nowadays that are carbureted, it's usually 1 or 2 screws, and it's usually mid-range, high end where you're adjusting the sync. That one, I've seen them come in where they're running on 1 cylinder and they think they blew up the other cylinder, and really your carb sync's just off. You start bringing it down, or bringing it up to where they all equal, and that's the idle, and then you rev it up to cruise speed, and then you adjust it again. So it's
kind of an art to it as well.
Yeah, there is definitely an art to that one. Yes.
I know if this guy's still around, but because of what you're saying, it's so hard to adjust those carbs. He was just selling rebuilt carbs, and you would swap out your carb for his, and hopefully, you put it in, hopefully it all works.
Right, yeah. I do have customers that do that. I do discourage folks buying the aftermarket carburetors. They look, smell, taste just like the real carburetor. They're not the same. And I've worked really hard trying to get those things to run, and the only thing they're good for me when I work on the vintage bikes is some of the parts off the bike. You can't buy a float bowl for that carburetor. You have to buy the whole carburetor, a genuine one. So it's $1,000, $1,500 for one carburetor, let's say. So I'll buy a Chinese knockoff of a carburetor and I need the float bowl, and I'll buy that, take that, put it on there.
I see.
And I don't know what to charge the customer, because you can't buy that part. So I have to make up a part to make it worth my while. And of course the customer's happy because I went that extra distance to make it work.
See, I wondered about that because you mentioned working on vintage bikes. I was going to buy, I'm done buying wrecked bikes or salvage bikes, because you own them forever after that, because nobody wants them. Even though they run great.
Right.
I was looking at a 2009 Yamaha R1.
Oh yeah.
And they started it for me at the Copart lot, and you could hear the clutch was making a lot of noise.
Yeah.
And I called the dealer and said, "Hey, is this clutch basket part still available?" They're like, "Nope." I'm like, "It's 2009. You don't have that part anymore?" And that's, I've got a 2005 YZF 600R. And I bought one of the last 3 fork tubes in existence, OEM.
Was this in the last 2 years that you bought these parts? Pre-pandemic or after pandemic or during the pandemic?
Pre.
Okay.
So
interesting.
Yeah, even then it was really thin.
Yeah, because I will say, during the pandemic, it was great. I mean, business was booming, and I had lots of work. But this past summer was probably my worst summer of finding parts. It's finally thinned out. Even dealerships, you can go to them and say, I'm just going to buy from a dealership. This is 2019. Well, good luck, because the manufacturing got shut down.
Yeah, it did. And actually, I take that back. I think I got the fork tubes right after. And at the same time, Yamaha, of course, they didn't know. They redid their parts inventory
Yes.
system. I don't know if you heard that. It was a mess.
Yeah.
But the other, I had this with that Roadster. You would order a part, and they wouldn't tell you it was back ordered.
Right.
Or if it was, you
Yes.
didn't have a date for it to come in.
Right. And I got bit a couple times on that very same issue, where you gave them your money, they ordered a part, and then I don't know where it's going to show up. I said, no, you just give me back my money. I'll find another way, because I don't think that's right either.
No, it's even getting a 0.5% in the bank's a 0.5% versus
Yeah.
having it out with them. But,
Right.
And so at least with the Harley parts, I found and sometimes you can call different dealers in different parts of the country, and they actually have it. It may be back ordered,
Right.
but maybe one dealer won't tell you that, maybe a different dealer has it.
Right.
So I found by calling around, there was a Harley dealer, and he was great. He's like, oh, there's one in New York and there's one in Sacramento.
Right. They can look at their parts inventory, yes,
Yeah,
by their computer. Right.
And I'll just say one other shop wasn't willing to do that,
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
was like, you got to get resourceful to get these parts.
You do have to get creative. I sadly I have to, I buy it from Amazon, eBay, certain websites that have vintage stuff that specialize that. I've ordered from India. I've ordered from Taiwan. I've ordered from Japan. I've ordered from Netherlands for BMW parts, Denmark, and I've actually had some pretty good luck. I thought for sure my money was going to be gone. And dealing with DHL, which is another service like UPS and FedEx, that part's sitting on my table within a week's time. Good luck on UPS and FedEx in my own country. That's a whole nother problem we have with parts. But I don't know what to say about the future of parts and bikes. I have a theory of what I think we'll see in the future.
Well, I'm interested in that because we're about the same age, so it's around 60 here. I wear a mechanical watch.
Yep.
I carry a pocket knife.
Yep.
I hire younger.
I actually
folks.
have a key.
Yeah, exactly.
And a fob.
And just things are different.
Right,
I don't want
right.
to say one thing's better than the other. It's just different.
Right.
So I didn't really grow up on video games. I played
Right.
pinball, even though I was in that
Yeah,
transition period.
Yep.
I would pick pinball over the electronic games. So now I wonder about kids growing up who don't have a grandparent or an uncle or an aunt that has a
Sadly,
farm,
yes.
so they're not riding a dirt bike or a Trail 90.
Right.
A lot of people don't have any tools at home.
Right.
So even a simple oil change, if
Yeah.
they find out, it's going to be $150 at the dealership, and there's a lot of barriers to motorcycle
Yes.
entry. So I guess in
Yes.
general, how do you see if you were to run a shop for the next 20 years, or an
Right.
independent shop,
Right.
whether you or somebody else,
Uh-huh.
what do you see as the future of an independent?
So that's another great question. I think that the tools I bought were back in the 80s and 90s, and I still buy them. But don't tell my wife that. And but anyways, and I have a gentleman, like I said, he's just starting up. He's only got a handful of tools, and I think the tools are still going to be the same. But I think the bikes, in a sense, are going to change. Where, in my opinion, if I can answer this question right, is that the bikes are going to get smaller. I think the days that we grew up where we're going to go to Key West, we're going to go to California, and the baggers, I ride a Goldwing, those days are done.
Mm-hmm.
Most folks under 40 years old, I tell this all the time, most folks under 40 years old are not interested in big bikes. They're only interested in driving for a couple hours, and they want to be home to be with their wife, kids, and their dog. That's just the way it is. And a lot of these dealerships and a lot of this other shops, they're still stuck on this old thinking. I said, you got to go with the times. Again, this is just my opinion, but when the people that come through that door, they're not coming in with those big bikes. The only people that come in with big bikes are the old timers. And once they fade out, you're not getting anybody. And if you look, there's an article I posted on my Facebook, talked about how all the metric manufacturers are getting rid of their big bikes.
Well, they are, and there's that pushback to what called the middleweight bikes.
Mm-hmm.
The 650 to 900
Yes,
cc range.
yes.
The adventure touring segment. Actually, I'm working on a video now. There's a dozen or more bikes in that 600 to 1,000 cc
Yes.
displacement, where the adventure touring style bikes have become the new universal
Yes.
bike
Yes.
because of luggage, comfortable riding position.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean,
The ability to go a little bit off-road, on-road, a little bit of that, both, yeah.
but that class of bike, typically you wouldn't want to take on a 3,000 mile trip, and because people aren't.
Right.
And I didn't think about it until you said it. I've been somewhat skeptical about the future of electric motorcycles just because of the limited range.
Yes.
But if the market is going that way already, maybe they know something
Right.
that I don't.
Right.
Harley's making a big play in electrics, and
Yes.
they've got that
Live wire, yeah.
that Taiwanese partner, so they can address the Asian
Yes.
market.
Right.
But if it's kind of a more urban, limited, regional distance kind of thing for most
Right.
people on a motorcycle, maybe it
Right.
does have some viability.
Right. I test rode a Zero a year ago. A gentleman, it's kind of a funny story, but I had some interest in the Zero just because I wanted to look forward to what we were going to have to deal with in the future. And so this gentleman came by, the door was open, he throws me the set of keys, and okay, what do you want me to do with these? And he goes, I want you to ride my bike. Okay, I'll ride your bike. And he says, but be careful, it's a Zero, and it'll go 0 to 60 in 60 miles an hour, whatever it was. And he says, it's really quick. So I got on it, and I was very impressed. I got down the end of the road, and I was impressed that the quickness of it, the speed of it, but the quietness, all I could hear was the chain. And then, of course, my first question was, how long can you go on one charge? And at that time, he said 200, which is an exaggeration. But I would say that I was impressed. I think, honestly, it's probably 100, 150. So for around here, I think it's great. Around college campuses, I think it's great. I think there is going to be a future in it. I don't know if it's going to be all electrics. I still a little bit on the fence post on that. I think gasoline engines are still the way to go. I mean, you can go a lot further. I know.
Well, I'm with you there. I'm just trying to wonder where the market's headed, because it does address a few things. A lot fewer parts. If you're
Yes.
not mechanically inclined, you're not going to do your own oil change.
Yeah.
Basically brakes, tires, and
Yeah.
at some point maybe you've got a battery replacement to deal with.
Right.
So
I am hoping that the parts availability on bikes, what people forget is a lot of these bikes get wrecked. And they come in here, and good luck trying to find a side cover, front fender, rear fender, seat. You can get handlebars, cables, and levers. And so when it comes to a company like Zero, let's say, are those parts going to be available? Are they going to swap around like what I'm hoping to see is there's a parts support for bikes when you get wrecked on that electric market. What I'm afraid of is, and I don't know enough about it yet, but as much as the Chinese scooters have come in and inundated our market, a lot of those bikes, you'll get a model, and then 6 months later you get another model, same engine, same everything, but the plastics are all different. So then you come in and go, well, I just need to replace this plastic. They don't make it anymore. So that's a little bit maddening. I thought, if that's the market that we're heading to, I just think that's kind of shameful that we're going to go to a market where you're basically throwing this stuff away.
yeah, just the whole disposable mindset
Yes.
is a problem. Trying to get aftermarket fairings for a sport bike.
Yes.
That YZF, the 2005 Yamaha.
Yes.
Reason it was totaled was because it was a broken fairing.
Right.
And so I thought, I could just order a new fairing. Well, initially I tried to order from a company in Florida. All they were really were drop shippers from China.
Right. The hookup.
And then of course that was when everything was chaos. I couldn't
Right.
get. So then I finally got one, and they sent me half of it.
Oh,
and
wow.
so, but ironically, it was the half that I absolutely needed. So I kept the original, blue pieces,
Right.
and then added these black pieces. I call it the Batman
Right.
bike.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
I thought, man, it shouldn't be so hard to order
Parts.
fairings,
No.
or anything for
Right.
that matter.
Yeah. The fairings are probably what I remember when I worked for Articat and Kawasaki, and I can't remember the other dealerships, but the plastic body parts are probably the first thing to go. I mean, that's the one thing that is exhausted in parts availability is the body parts. Once that's over, then you'll find engine parts for a long time. You'll find cables. And, I'm trying to think of other things, but like I said before, handlebars, levers, mirrors, foot pegs, wheels. Generally, you can find. But yeah, body parts are probably the worst.
That's interesting you say that, because right now I've got 2 bikes that I just plan on keeping forever, which for me,
Yeah.
I've been buying a lot of bikes and trading them here the last few years, but my wife got me a 2020 Katana for
Nice.
our 25th
Yeah,
wedding anniversary. And then this past October, I picked up a Gen 3 Hayabusa.
Oh wow, yeah, okay.
And,
All right.
a lot of people would be okay buying a prepaid service plan, as an example.
Right.
If you're going to have a sport bike with a full fairing, it might not be a bad idea to buy the OEM replacement fairing and just put it in a box in your basement,
Yeah. I actually did that with my racing off-road. I had a Kawasaki KLX 450 I was racing in the desert in Washington, and that's what we did, is we went ahead and bought another set of plastics, and I kept the stock ones in a box, and then had another one that were all like monster racing stickers and stuff. And
that's
what
cool.
what I trashed, and then of course I always thought it looked better with that than the stock ones, but that was always available when that bike was ready to sell. So
That's an interesting idea. In terms of people, you say you've got a young person now that you found that you're
Yes.
really showing
Promise, yeah, lots of good promise, yeah.
So how do you think dealerships or independent shops are having? Or you think they're having much luck recruiting staff?
That's another great question to ask. As long as I've been doing this, the one big institution that trains motorcycle mechanics, future motorcycle mechanics, is MMI. They used to have one in Orlando. I don't know if that's still around. It might still be around. And another one in Phoenix. And I've known some of the teachers. One of the problems I have with that, I think it's a great place to start. But most students that are graduated from those courses come through the doors feeling that they're worth $50 an hour, $100 an hour, and that's not the case. Even your best mechanics aren't really making that kind of money. So they pump them with this idea that, oh yeah, you can go to any dealership, pick whatever dealership you want, and you're going to make $50 an hour. You're going to start working on tire machines and oil changes and assembling new bikes. That's pretty much at $15 an hour, whatever it is. I don't know what they charge now, honestly. So in the case with Noah, he kept coming in here asking questions of vehicles that he was taking apart at home, and he just kept coming in, and he would have gears in his hands, and he'd go, okay, I understand second gear is bad, and I can see that the matching gear next to it's bad, and I notice the shift fork looks to be a little bit slightly bent, but what do you think of this gear? I'm looking at him going, who are you? Because most young folks like yourself are not playing with gears. They're on their cell phone.
Right.
And he was figuring it out himself. So after about 2 years of that, I decided to pick him up and say, hey, I'll pick you. I could use someone like you. Come in here and I'll show you the ropes. And he went from there. But there's not a lot of shops that'll take people right off the street and spend the time to teach. They'll rather see you go to a school or college of some sort to do that. So if you can get young folks to get in a dealership where they do have some kind of training program, I totally encourage, like an apprenticeship. I would love to see that kind of stuff.
But it requires some different expectations on the apprentice, as it were, that
Yes.
you're not going to make $50 an hour starting out.
Right.
You know, I see that in general. I've got a son who is going to get his welding cert here
Nice.
in a few weeks. He's completed the coursework.
Yeah.
He's just waiting for them to
Yes.
send it to him.
Yeah.
And you know, you hear about the shortage of welders,
Trade
and
work. Yep.
and it's true. But at the same time, they're starting welders out about $17 an hour.
Yeah.
And you know, you
Right.
could work at fast food for 15. It's like,
Right.
well, wait.
Yeah.
But the part that I was explaining to him is that everybody starts out, no matter what field they're in, being underpaid in essence,
Right.
because
Yes.
you're still learning. I
Right.
mean, you're always learning, but
Right.
you're really learning a lot
Yeah.
at the beginning. And you know, work as hard as you can for yourself.
Right.
You know, provide a good value for your employer, but don't feel like you're entitled to a bunch of stuff, or hey, you know, I'm only going to work so hard to be commensurate with my
Yes.
low pay. That's
Yes.
wrong thinking.
Right. So they have to understand that when you get out of schools, there's still going to be some learning, especially when we're learning from older folks. We at the railroad, we call them old heads, and so they're gonna show you things that the school doesn't tell you about. And for an example, I had a student that came up. This is when I was back in Seattle, straight from MMI, and he was, I'm worth $25 an hour or whatever. And I said, well, you know, we all have to start somewhere. And so I just asked him one question. I said, so when you're working on a carburetor and it's not idling, what's the first thing you would do? And he goes, well, I tear it apart and clean it up and put it back together. I said, what do you do with that idle fuel mixture screw? There's a brass screw. Mm-hmm. It's a fuel mixture screws in front of the float bowl, and it's usually an air screw in the back of the carburetor. And I said, what would you do that? And he goes, oh, we keep it capped off. So why would you keep it capped off? Because, well, we were never told to even mess with that, because that's straight from the factory. And I said, son, you need to understand that all motorcycles that I'm aware of are not subjected to any kind of emissions testing. You can drill them out and you can adjust it. And I can tell you which cylinder, if it's a multi-cylinder motorcycle, and I can tell you by adjusting those which cylinder is the bad one, and you can actually clean a pilot jet backwards. It's a trick that you can do. It doesn't always work, but you can go that route. But they're not going to teach you that in school. You're only going to learn that from someone who's been in the field, such as myself. So that's the thing that I think I wish and I hope that's what the schools are doing, is they're teaching these kids that, hey, we gave you a good platform to start with, but as you go forward in this field, understand that there's a lot more to learn from the dealerships and independent shops. So, you know,
Oh yeah, I mean, I think in general that's sort of going along with society where, again, I'm not trying to make it sound like, oh, the young people are doing, it's just different.
Right, yes.
And with the internet, and I've seen this with performance vehicle salespeople, whether
Yeah.
it's cars or motorcycles,
Yes.
where you can go in and end up knowing way more than they do about the
Yes.
product. And,
Right.
and instead the mindset a lot of times is, well, I don't have to know a lot of stuff, but I can, as long as I can find it out.
Right. Yes.
And so, you know, I don't know if you see that trend where maybe they don't need to have a broad mechanical education,
Right.
as long as they're able to figure it out,
Yes.
or get the information.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I think that most of the young gentlemen that come through here or other shops I worked at, you can pretty much tell if they have the aptitude and the gun ho, let's say, to work on stuff. But a lot of times they're really energetic, but once they start working, they're like, yeah, I'm not into this. I didn't know it was going to be this dirty. But most of them really do want to learn, but I think it's the way they're taught. When I worked in dealerships, we had our own schooling, but it was, to me, I thought it was bland, dry, book. I think most people like to get their hands dirty right off the bat. I would love to show somebody how to work on something right now, and you'll figure it out a lot faster, in my opinion, if I can show you how to do a tire change right now on that bike, versus reading a book going, oh yeah, okay, all right, and to me that's you're going to bore a lot of kids that way.
Well, and I tend to be a overthinker in some respects, but I also try to take action.
Yes, right.
So I'll tell you this story. So we bought this 82 Virago for my boys to work on.
Right.
And one of the first things, it had 25-year-old tires on it.
Yep.
So we bought the tire irons, and we had to figure out how to take the back
Were they this
wheel.
big? Or were they this big?
They were pretty big.
Okay.
And
it makes the job easier if they're bigger.
Shaft drive. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to look at YouTube videos. I bought the shop manual.
Yeah.
I wanted to study.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I come out in the garage, and my son, who was 14 at the time, already had the back wheel off.
Right.
He just did it.
Right.
And
I'm impressed.
And it showed me something that, hey, he's got a real aptitude. Now,
Right.
I said, okay, now where does this go? And where does that go? And he's like, oh, so he didn't think about the real methodical part, but he learned. So it was better for him to have just done it than think and think and think and push off when you're actually getting your hands dirty.
So when I was learning, I got kind of thrown in the fire. I was in competition with another guy that was learning how to work on motorcycles. And he eventually had some family problems, so he left, and then I stayed, and his main mechanic pretty much said, I'm out. And so I was thrown into the fire. I said, yep, you're my number one mechanic now. I knew nothing. But this is the days of microfiche and manuals. And the owner was busy with the ordering parts, dealing with customers and stuff. So I worked until literally 11, 12 o'clock at night trying to understand this and try to make money. And but what I'm getting at is when the fall and the winter time comes, such as right now, it's winter time here, is we had a small wrecking yard. And that's when I really understood how motorcycles were put together. As you start tearing those bikes apart, engines, frame, how to pull them out of the frame. There's usually one way. There's not two ways. They either go out the left or you go out the right. You drop out the bottom, or you got to lift the frame up. You take the rear wheel off and the shaft drive off first, or can you leave it in place? And so as time went on, if a gentleman can get in there and get in a shop that might have a little bit of a wrecking yard, they'll understand how things are put together too. You don't have to put them back together. You're just trying to learn how to use tools, and that's really what I also really point out is that first year is about learning how to use tools. Most of it, I know how to use a screwdriver. I know how to use a wrench. No, you don't, because you're going to be breaking them, you're going to stripping them, you're going to round them, and yes. So I think the first year is all about tools first.
It's interesting you say that because, you have to develop muscle memory.
Yeah.
So in the line of work that I'm in, occasionally we have to attach some sensors, and they've got 1/4-20 bolts.
Yeah.
And for a time I used to think, I'll just get a torque wrench, and it's like, no, after a while you get the right feel for how tight they need to be.
Yes.
And I'm bringing a lot of people that are just out of college, college age.
Right.
And I can't take it for granted that they've used a drill, or
that's the
which
last
way
thing I ever used is a drill.
or a socket. Which way to turn the socket, and it's just different.
Yeah.
It used to be, really, you don't know how to use a socket wrench, but it's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
So I expect that you don't, and I'll show you how to do it.
Right. Yeah, you can. It's all about setting it. And when I started buying, I had a bunch of Sears tools back in the Craftsman tools, and then I started buying Snap-on, which is really nice, but they're very overpriced and expensive. But that's what I did. But it's all about setting that tool in place, such as a Phillips, and you just go in there and you hit it with an impact, it's just going to break the bit, it's going to round the bolt. And now you're going to spend more time trying to figure out how to get that out. And everybody usually breaks out the drill and starts drilling. Stop! Don't do that. There's other ways of doing things. You can use a ball peen hammer, smash it down a little bit, then set your screw and get a hand impact, hit it with a hammer, it usually turns it, you're done. Or use a chisel. There's other ways of getting that bolt out before you break out the drill. And that's another thing I kind of watch. How, I've seen guys come in here with 10, 15 years. I'm a mechanic. Okay. And then I see them beat, heat, bend, pry, break, smash, swear, cuss, trying to get that bolt out. Like, man, if you just did it right the first time. So I would definitely say with your sons and anybody else that's listening that when it comes to learning about bikes, I hope they're teaching about how to use tools. They don't just say, grab that, oh, I know what I'm doing, and put it in there.
So speaking of that, if you're a young person, whether you're doing your own maintenance at home to learn,
Yes.
Going out and getting tools, I mean, nobody's going to start out buying Snap-ons probably.
No.
And the Craftsman stuff is not.
I would not encourage it, only because you got to understand, you might not be in that field. Now you spent $10,000 on a nice little toolbox and a set of tools, and now all of a sudden 3 years later, and I've met folks like that too. Oh, I was working for Harley, and then 3 years later, like, yeah, I'll never work. I'm never doing that. That was a horrible field for me. I was not good at it, and now you got all these tools. So I usually tell people, just get good. There's a lot of manufacturers out there that you can probably buy. I'm not going to say Harbor Freight and that kind of stuff. And, there's some tools you can probably buy, hammers there, and pry bars and stuff. Like Noah, he's got a handful of tools, but I would say before he starts thinking about Snap-on, go to the like Matco, Mac Tools, Cornwell or Cromwell. I think maybe even like Lowe's or Home Depot, they might have their own little tools that they have some kind of warranty that have a little bit of oomph to them and do the job. So I tell them to kind of spend that kind of money on that first.
And you're going to have your tools for your whole life.
Yes, it's an investment. It really is, because even if you got out of the field, you still have a nice set of tools that you can work in your car, you can work in your wife's car, you can work in your tractors, your trucks, whatever.
So what would you say would be a basic set of tools? Would it be SAE and metric sockets?
When I first started, it was all metric, so I heavily invested in metric stuff. But I think nowadays you want to get a little bit of both. With wrenches, I would say metrics and standards. Sockets, metrics and standards. I don't know if you need to go in the motorcycle field. I don't think you need to go with, the impact sockets, the black heavy-duty ones, because they got thick walls, or hard to get into certain spots on a motorcycle. I've always used chrome my whole life. Every once in a while they'll split, but they split because I got stupid. I didn't set it. So if you can set that wrench right, you make sure that bolt is pretty well squared, then it's going to come right off. So I would say sockets, ratchets, and wrenches there. Hammers, pry bars, crescent wrenches, pliers. You can go you can go Harbor Freight for all I care, because that's all that is.
How about a good T-handle set?
Good T-handle set. I've got some German-made ones, and I've got some cheap aftermarket ones, and they're great for putting body parts back on. I always try to use hand tools. That's one thing I also encourage with Noah, is that he uses hand tools. It's very rare to ever see him use a hand impact. I have all the electric impacts, which are really nice, but most people don't know how to use them. They get the biggest one and they hammer it in, try to hammer it out, round bolts, brake tools.
Cross thread stuff.
Yeah, I just use hand tools. Nice, easy, nice, quiet shop. You'll get a feel of it. You'll know when you're stressing a bolt, you've gone too tight, or you know you're going to need something bigger to get it out. So
I imagine in the summer you get extremely busy.
Yes, yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's a huge balance, because I'm also turning wrenches too, and I have to order parts, deal with customers, call customers back as best I can, try to answer phones, and sometimes we just get so lost in our work that I just can't answer the phone because I got busy. I would say most of my customers are tolerant, and I'm trying to find another word, but what I'm trying to say is that they're tolerant of me knowing that I'm busy, that I can't answer that phone all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, we get really busy, I will say.
So it's you and Noah?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
For right now, my idea is that for this upcoming year, I think I am going to hire maybe someone else to maybe have a little bit more. Noah has about a year, 2 years, and then he's got some home experience, let's say, because he already knows how to kind of use how to use tools. But I'm probably looking for someone with 5, 10, 15 years that has a little bit more, where I can step back and do more customer phone work, ordering parts, and being more involved in the motorcycle industry. There's a lot of people that still doesn't know about me, and a lot of folks have invited me to go to events that I never can go to because I'm busy running a shop and working. So I'd like to step back and be able to introduce myself at other dealerships and work as a family and a community instead of, I don't deal with those guys because he looked at me cross. I don't want to go there because they overpriced me. I think in the motorcycle industry, we need to work together. We can still be in business. There's plenty of work out there. I just think we need to work together. That's another philosophy of mine.
Well, times are good for people in the motorcycle industry, but good times don't last forever. And I think there's a good chance that if we actually have a recession where the new sales are going to slow down, used bikes are going to pile up, and the industry could go through some lean times.
It can. Now, I've been doing this, like I said before, since the 80s. Seattle was, I always keep saying that, but in Seattle, I think the country had gone through several, let's say, recessions and high cost of fuel, but it didn't affect us because there was a lot of money. But now I'm in the Midwest since 2010, and we're heading towards a recession, supposedly, and the belts are going to be tightened up. Your new sale of bikes might go down, but they're going to still want to ride. And they're still going to want to do repairs, and they're still going to do a lot more DIYs where they're going to try and do it themselves, which I also encourage. I think it's great that you're learning how to do it. Because in one aspect, it actually produces more work because you did it wrong. Now I got to do it. But number two is you get to know your bike, which is what you should do. You shouldn't just go out there and turn the key, that's good, and go. You should know how to check your tires, adjust and lube your chain, look at your brakes, make sure all your lights are working, that it's performing correctly. You should know how to change your oil. So I think with this upcoming maybe a downturn in the market, I would be surprised that my business would fall because of that. I really do. I think we're all going to be very busy, in my opinion.
So that's good to be optimistic about. Do you ever go to trade shows like the AIM Expo in Vegas?
No, I know that when I worked for the dealerships, we had our own shows that were traveling around, international motorcycle shows that I would go to, and I get to see new product and stuff. But I haven't been to one of those in probably a good 10 years. So.
But I can understand what you're saying, trying to get somebody at least mid-level. So the old cliche is to work on your business instead of in your business. Right.
Yeah.
And if you're in the trenches, and you're too busy to answer the phone, with your experience and opportunity to do other things, you would like to free up your time for that.
Yes. And I just, like I said, I'm going to keep repeating myself. I just think it's good that as business owners in this industry, we should really be meeting other dealerships and other shops. And I've met a few, but there's still a standoff. Well, I'm not going to talk to you because you're that guy down there. And why do we have to do that? We don't need to do that.
I see what you're saying. It's not a zero-sum game. If people collaborated to a higher degree, perhaps, then there's just going to be a bigger pie.
Right. The 3 dealerships that are around me right now, they send me work. And I've got shops on the other side of town that send me work because of my reputation, but because their bikes are old. But my big stipulation is I don't want you to send me junk. Don't, just because it's 5 years old or older, you're saying take it to Holloway's. That's one thing. But I've seen folks come here before I talk to them, where they're bringing in a bike that's been sitting in the weeds for 30 years. It's got a 2-stroke engine and a 4-stroke dirt bike, and they want me to wire it up and make it run. It's not going to happen. I don't want it.
You don't want a basket case.
Right. I don't want a basket case. But at the same time, I'm willing to work with you because there's some things that you can do, and there's some things I can do, and I can save you money. So with that, with talking with other service managers and writers at other dealerships, I just say, look, I'll send you work. You can send me work. I can't figure this out. My hands are up. I'm going to send them your way if that's okay. And they do the same with me, and that's the way it should be. Like I said, there's plenty of work out there to be done.
I mean, it only makes sense. If I worked at a dealership service department, and I had a policy where I wasn't going to work on this 10-year-old bike, even though that dealership may have sold it to them.
Right.
I think they owe it to their customer to have a viable alternative they can recommend.
Right. And that's what I want to be. And I think that's what independent shops should be. We should be an alternative for this dealership, so that, because I've also seen this, witnessed it before, where someone buys a bike and 5 years later they won't work on it, and now they're, why do I even be in this field? No one's going to work on my bike. And that's where shops like myself should help out.
Yeah, I think maybe when people buy a bike, they're not, especially if they're new to it. I see some blind spots. A lot of people are thinking about the most bike they can buy with the money they have,
Right.
and they're not thinking about gear,
Right.
or they're not thinking about maintenance and repair.
Right. Parts availability.
Exactly.
Right.
Or even insurance.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah. Insurance is astronomical. When I first opened up this shop, within 2 weeks, it was about 3 years ago, I had my Goldwing parked right here, and I had a woman's V-Star right here, and a drunk person came through my building.
Oh, wow.
This is all new cinder block, new window, and it totaled my Goldwing, and it totaled her bike, and I think I had maybe 2 other bikes. I literally just opened, and no one got hurt, and he ended up in the pokey for drunk driving on a Sunday. We still don't understand why he was drunk on a Sunday at 9 o'clock, but whatever. But my insurance covered my Goldwing. It was mostly plastic. They totaled it, but it was all plastic. And this poor woman's bike was pretty messed up too. I don't know where I was going with that, but I was just going to say.
Well, you're talking about insurance.
Insurance
yeah.
is expensive. And if I didn't have that insurance, that would have been a total bike. And I guess what I'm trying to drive at is, a lot of these bikes, they buy the bike because it's beautiful, it's the color they wanted, they've always wanted one, and then they get to their first service and it's $800. That Ducati, I've seen reports of service on that, including the belts and valve adjust, is $800 to $1,200 for a service. That's insane. But the guy didn't think of that when he bought the bike. So it's like that with a lot of bikes. So you got that, and then they go, well, I'm going to get insurance for my bike. Oh, it's the Ducati, or oh, it's a Goldwing. Oh, well, that's $5,000 a year, which I'm exaggerating, but it's expensive, and they don't think of that. Sport bikes, especially. I think Harleys are. At one time, I know they were the #1 stolen bike. I don't know what they are today. It could be that and sport bikes, for all I know.
Yeah. I had a follow-up for you, and it just floated away. Well, people our age, that's the great thing. Insurance is pretty cheap.
Yes.
But for younger folks, not so much.
Not so much.
You
exactly.
gotta, and you're probably, if you think about even $1,000 service, the cost of buying a new motorcycle, you've got 10% sales tax. You've got all the depreciation. In many respects, even though I'm the worst example of it because I'm always buying new bikes,
right.
You're better off having a bike you love and just keep it up.
Right. One thing that I know we haven't touched on is, and it just occurred to me when you're talking about insurance, is that you have a lot of new riders, and a lot of new riders. What I've seen is they want to buy the biggest, baddest bike right off the bat. Don't do that. You don't even know how to shift a bike. Well, I'm going to take the course. You're going to need more than just that. So I try to encourage folks to get into a scooter or an off-road dirt bike and just play around in the field and get the fundamentals down. Because the last thing you want to do is see someone out there on a bike that can do 150 miles an hour and they're struggling on how everything works and they're dealing with traffic. And that I find is very dangerous. And being in this field, I probably know 30 plus folks have been killed on bikes. Either from them doing something stupid or being in the wrong place at the wrong time or just not having the experience. So in saying that, when people, well, I don't want to buy another bike for a couple $1,000, just buy a scooter. There's lots of scooters out there for less than $1,000 that have clutches, and learn on that, and then you can sell it and you probably make what you paid for it. So you didn't lose anything. You didn't wreck that nice new bike and dropped it.
That's a good point. And what we call scooters here is
Yeah.
a motorcycle in
There.
most parts of the country
Right.
or world.
Yeah.
You know,
And I think if you're 50 cc's or smaller, I don't think you need a license or insurance.
I believe that's true. Yeah, 49 cc's or less. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
not required to license it.
So there's another chance of you being able to experience the world of motorcycling, if that's your goal, is to go in kind of on the cheaper side, least expensive side, and see if that's what you want. Because I've seen a lot of dads come in here, yeah, I got him a bike, and he wrecks it. And now we're back to the plastic, the front fender, the gas tank that you can't get anymore because it's 5 years old or older or whatever.
Yeah, you know, I think that people do underestimate just the muscle memory that's needed for clutch, gas, brake.
Right.
My kids, I've got them on motorcycles, and they've always started out in a parking lot extensively till they were almost bored to tears.
Right.
Right in the parking lot.
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of need to, because you don't want them to have to think, oh, I'm in second gear now. And, you don't have time for that out there. The driving around nowadays seems to be worse than it's ever been. So it's I get scared for new riders because of that.
Yeah, it's a different mindset lately. You know, the last couple of years where people got to drive with virtually no speed enforcement.
Right.
And the trend towards big SUVs and trucks where
Yes.
they feel invulnerable.
Yes.
When they have bigger blind spots.
Yes. Yeah.
And just on and on.
I mean, the joke with motorcyclists, what I call the professional ones that ride all the time, we kind of wish that every car driver could go and ride a motorcycle for a year, just so you know it. You got to turn your head. You got to look over your shoulder. It'll never happen, but I'm just, sometimes you just kind of go, well, why can't you see me? Now, I also will agree that we also put ourselves in that situation. So you're riding along, and you're just like, I'm really loving this country, and you put yourself right in a blind spot. Get in front of it, or get behind it, or move over, or whatever. So, and I think that's where some of the folks I knew got hurt or killed, because they put themselves in a situation and they weren't thinking what the other drivers think. Because you got to always believe that they're going to kill you.
Yeah, the situational awareness aspect of it. Or they say people who ride motorcycles make better vehicle drivers.
Mm-hmm. Right. I agree. I can see someone who twitches. I can tell that they're going to make a move because you always follow where you look. Mm-hmm. So I go, he's going to take the exit. Well, I better back off because he's going to move over. And chances are he's not going to look over his shoulder or turn his turn signal on.
In terms of just going back to running a business, do you feel like you have all the work that you can handle? Do you have a marketing plan that you execute, or how? I mean, maybe when you started out, it was having to get work, but now you're in a place.
I think right now I'm in a position where I can turn away work. I don't want to turn away work. I really honestly want to work on everybody's bikes, including ATVs. I've kind of shunned away from ATVs just because they take up a lot of space and they require a lot more work a lot of times. And in saying that, I think I'm in a position where I would like to do a little bit more marketing, but I have such a small space that I just want to maintain what I have, add a little bit, maybe another gentleman in here that can crank out the work just as fast, and not, so I don't have to always, my new guy, I have to kind of watch what he's doing and kind of steer him in the right direction. I need someone who is a little bit more of a self-starter and going with it. And I think once that flow gets going, it's going to be easier for me to bring in more work. Right now, if I'm doing a lot of the work, it puts a stress on myself and on Noah, because we can only do that much. And if something goes bad, and that does happen, where all of a sudden you're like, it's just an oil change and a tire change, and you find out, it's the wrong tire size, the wheel bearings are bad, and you need to change the sprockets. Now the parts need to be ordered. Now you got a bike that's either tied up on the rack, or now we got to get it all off, pull it off to the side, and bring something else in. So
I could see that being a real challenge with older bikes, and that's why a lot of the shops, dealer shops, don't want to mess with it. Is like going back to the Virago, when we took the front wheel off to replace that tire, the bolt that attached the speedometer cable to the hub broke.
Yeah.
Well, there was no speedometer hub to be bought.
Right.
No, I couldn't find. I didn't
Right.
know a junkyard. So ended up drilling it out and epoxying a little
Yeah.
quarter 20
Yeah.
bolt
Yeah.
and as a stud.
To get, yeah.
And I can imagine you deal with stuff like that.
Yes, and that's probably one of my biggest challenges is when a bike comes in, we try to get to it within a day or two to at least diagnose what it needs so I can start looking for parts. The other thing sadly I have to do since this pandemic happened is that I don't want your bike in here until I know the parts are available, and that's really helped. And sadly you have to wait. But if you say I got an 82 Farrago and I want the carbs cleaned and I want a rear tire and I'm looking for a side cover, I'm going to say, well, hold on for a second. Let me order the carburetor rebuild kit. Let me order the tire, and let me find a side cover. I'm not going to promise you I can find it, but I get the other work. Once those parts come in here, then bring your bike in, and I'll have it turned around, hopefully within a day or two, a week at the most, is what the plan is. But a lot of folks just want to drop off stuff, and I go, where am I going to park it while I'm ordering the parts? And then I find out the parts aren't available. I'm calling around.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then next thing I know, I got 15 bikes that I can't bring another bike in until those get done. And it's frustrating for the customer. It's frustrating for me because I just want to, make money, but at the same time help people. So,
have you ever been tempted to find vintage bikes and fix them up yourself to flip them?
I have a few myself, and it's a long road. I will say I have a 75 TM250 up there that I've pulled the engine out, got started on it, and there it's sat. I just got real busy. I've got a KDX 250 dirt bike, vintage dirt bike. I started buying stuff, running out of time. And then, of course, now parts are even harder to find nowadays. 2 years ago, it was easier for me to find a brake hub or a brake lever.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah.
Let me look at I think we covered a lot of stuff here. Anything that you just like to talk about?
Well, I think we covered, some of the future issues and some of the. I am very hopeful for this industry. I don't think it's a dying industry. I will say that. So I want your followers to understand that I'm still very excited about this field. I think there are some really good people out there that can help train and teach younger folks in this field to do this. I don't think it's a dead industry. I don't care if we go electric or not, if we go scooters. I think there's always going to be money. Mm-hmm. Americans love their vehicles, regardless.
Oh yeah, I can tell you've got the bug. I've got the bug.
Yeah.
I mean, all our disposable income spent on performance cars.
We don't want to tell our wives that, though.
Well, she supports my habit pretty well. So, but yeah, I mean, once you start getting storage units and putting stuff away, then you've gone to a whole nother level.
Right,
so,
and I have a few customers that do have storage units full of stuff. Yeah.
She's been really patient with me. She parks in the driveway because. Well, there's only enough room for the sports car and the bikes in the garage now. So. I don't know if do you want to show anything of your shop or?
Well, you saw my little teeny showroom. I was working at the railroad and I came up with this drawing. I was like, let's make a counter out of concrete. And I had some old gears, I think from a 305 Dream, some old Kawasaki's, and I kind of put them in there. But it takes 2 people to lift this section. It takes about 4 people to lift that section, and it's pretty insane. Like I said, I already showed you my old bike. I just got finished with the local vintage guy. He needed some help getting this all timed ready, so I got that ready for him. Old gas pump I got when I was 18, 19 years old, and never did anything with it. Of course, all my tools, the Ducati I've mentioned before, an old bike. Some gears from an old XT600 gentleman about our age that needed. These are his old gears, and they're just pitted up really bad. They're kind of common on the XT600s from the 80s, and he found another set. So I'm going to go through it and see what I can find to make it work for him. That's kind of a fun job there. His transmission. There's an old. I think he said it was a 65 Taco Matador. It was fully restored. Then he let it sit in a barn.
Oh, okay.
I said, oh heck yeah, bring it down. I'd love to work on that. Well, 2 months later, I've got it running, but it's a hard bike to kick over. I mean, you got to kick it hard.
Really?
Yeah. When you get it running and it dies, and so this one's a little bit frustrating, but I haven't given up on it. This here's a nightmare that I had for a while. I replaced the wire harness, replaced the coils. I just ordered a CDI box for it. It's like a 95, 96, 94 Triumph Adventure, and I have to say these old Triumphs, the electrics are a nightmare. They're just not built that well, in my opinion. I think the new ones are phenomenal, but I think the old ones, but this is when they were just starting to come back.
Right. I think the 90s era Ducatis had the same issue
Yes.
with electrics.
Yes, yes. And then, you know, I have an old Yamaha that came in from North Carolina. It was actually here, but he's from North Carolina, Maryland kind of area. And I brought it back to life, and then the parts availability just kind of dropped. He was going to paint it, but I had the seat reupholstered, got the engine running, got the carburetor clean, timing, but now he needs cables, grips, and some other little things, but good luck trying to find that. And then, you know, I've got a Honda CB550. The guy wants to sell it. Been sitting for about maybe 10 years. We got that running last week.
So a big thank you to John Holloway of Holloway's Motorcycle Service in Grandview, Missouri. If you're in the region and you're looking for an independent shop, check him out. I've got his contact information listed in the description of this video. Thanks for watching, everyone.